Click for IB Biology. We're looking at the concept of primary succession within the topic of environmental stability and change. And this is very much an example of change over time. The example that we're going to look at is of glacial retreat. There's a blank PDF of this presentation down in the description. There's 10 questions with answers, and you can chart your own progress by doing those questions. So our story begins high in the mountains of the European Alps, in the Swiss Alps, where we have near Arctic conditions, and up there's no vegetation. It's a world of snow and ice and extremely low temperatures, as was said, near Arctic conditions. There may be on south-facing rocks, you may get just the slightest of lichens growing on those rocks, but their growth rates are incredibly slow. But what we're going to do is we're going to descend down from this mountain to lower elevations. And of course, as the elevation reduces, the temperature increases. And as we descend down off the glaciers and the mountain peaks, we start to come down into the valleys, and we're heading towards the snout of the glacier, where the glacier is melting and retreating. And of course, over time, the glacier will retreat in this direction, a point to be remembered as we go through this topic. The snout of the glacier is characterized by bare rock, very, very low levels of nutrients and minerals. It's a very infertile location, and the only things that can actually grow there are lichens, the combinations of algae and fungi. The algae photosynthesizing, the fungi is gathering the nutrients in its systems, and they combine the two to bring about the growth of the lichens. And that would happen at the beginning of the glacial snout. Now we're going to maintain our standing position here at the snout of the glacier over a very, very long period of time, and watch the ice retreat and watch what happens beneath our feet. And what we would see initially in a 50-year period would be the development on the rocks. The bare rocks would start to become covered in different types of lichen. But as those lichens develop, they also die and decay. And what they then start to do is to form the simplest of soils. But they're such simple soils with very, very low fertility and nutrient levels can take 50 or longer years to develop. Each of these colors that you can see in the image is a different type of lichen. But with the death of those lichens, the bare rocks have now got a very simple soil on them, and after 50 or so years, it's possible for the soil conditions to now favor the mosses. And so now we have environmental change, and the change is from a region covered in lichen to a region covered in mosses beneath our feet. But you'd have to stand there for 50 to 100 years to say that. So the mosses replaced the lichens. These mosses themselves form carpets across the rocks, and they too will develop into large populations of bryophytes and mosses, but they will die, and their slow decomposition will bring about the development of an even richer soil. And that richer soil favors species such as horsetails. So they will be able to grow there and replace the mosses. So again, we now have our environmental change. Horsetails are very ancient species. The fossil record shows them even being back there in the Devonian. They can take advantage of the richer soil. They outcompete the mosses and the lichens. And so now the vegetation in this area has changed. We are in a new xeral stage. Perhaps now we're almost 100 meters from the front of the glacier. So in this diagram here, you recall originally we were standing in this position, and we saw the development of the lichens. But then gradually those lichens were still in this position here. Those lichens were replaced by mosses and the horsetails. But at the same time, the ice is retreating, and that now creates new conditions in which the lichens can start to grow. So now we have lichens, mosses, and horsetails moving away from the glacier. In time, the horsetails and the mosses will form richer soils, And then under those conditions, woody species such as willow and alder are able to outcompete the horsetails and the mosses. The horsetails and the mosses will disappear, and the willows and the alders will begin to grow well, including things like heathers, the ling species, hardy woody species, and they will start to grow and cover and make new soils, and indeed in their own way start to modify the soils. So they have outcompeted the previous community. The community is changing to a new sterile stage. At these stages, just occasionally it's possible for seeds to blow into the area for species like firewort. Firewort has special biological characteristics which allow it to take the opportunity of a small patch of locally rich soil, slightly richer soil, to flower and to briefly grow in the short alpine summers. And our standing position was here and remains here, and now we're here like this, and we're surrounded by alders and willows and heathers, and we look back at the glacier and over 100-year period, and we look back, but at the front of that glacier, now we have the lichens here, we have the mosses, we have the horsetails, we have the lings, and now we have the alders. And so the species list is growing more complex. The food webs and food chains are going more complex around us, and the other feature is it's becoming more stable. Here we're relatively stable, here we're still unstable. 150 years to 200 years, the same location that we're standing in becomes occupied, as I said, by all the alders, but now we're allowing the growth of larger species such as birch trees. The ferns are occupying, and the flowering asters are starting to occupy the richer soils created. And these species here outcompete the alders and the willows, and so now we're developing small forests and alpine meadows around our standing position. In time, should we manage to stand there for 200 years, we would be standing here. Once we were at the beginning of the retreating ice with just lichen beneath our feet, but now we have coniferous forest developing in this location here. And we look back, and as we look back to the front of the glacier, it's like looking back through the seral stages. It's also a record of the history of the development of the actual coniferous forest in this location, with the birches in this location, the willows here, giving way to the lings, and in this location we've got the horsetails and the mosses, and of course back here we've got the lichens occupying as pioneers the new area. In time, it is possible, theoretically possible, that broadleaf forests could replace the coniferous woodlands characterized by forests such as these, including oak trees and other dominant species like this, and these become the stable, long-lasting type of natural environment, lasting for long periods of time, and these are called climax vegetation types, the final seral stage. So that if we diagrammatically look at our experience, having retained this position here in the story as the ice retreats this way, after a period of time with the ice retreating to this location in anything from 200 to 300 years, our position here has changed from lichens to mosses to hardy woody species into the conifers, and finally, perhaps in another stage, we would actually result in the development of broadleafed deciduous woodland. And as I said previously, the record of that period of time can actually be traced simply by walking from far away towards the snout of a glacier. It's as if you're walking back through a historical timeline of the development and changes of the stability and changes of the communities in this area. And that where we begin has now become dominated by biotic factors, where previously it was dominated by abiotic. And of course, the abiotic still continues to dominate here. So we go from unstable conditions at the front of the glacier to the stable conditions, the larger food chains, longer food chains, the more complex food webs in this zone here compared to what we started from at the beginning of our story. This is an example of primary succession. The next video is another example of primary succession that takes place on sand dunes. Here's the link to the channel. Click that so we can see your appreciation of the efforts we're making. And here's the playlist to all the videos in this topic of environmental stability and change.